extremism is what we call it. We can deal with the root causes of what it is that attracts these young men to these really negative ideological groups.
General Holder, does this attack signal that the war on terror is entered kind of a new phase where we're dealing with these homegrown terrorists who go to other places, get training, then come back to their home country and carry out these attacks?
Oh, I think we have been in that phase for some time, Bob. I think the decimation of core al-Qaeda has probably reduced, if not eliminated, the ability of al-Qaeda to do the kind of thing that they did on September the 11th. On the other hand, al-Qaeda affiliates like al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has moved what they do to smaller kinds of attacks. They have inspired people negatively around the world to engage in these really small attacks that involve only one or two people, a small number of arms, that can have a devastating impact, as we have seen in France. But we have been in this phase of the fight against terrorism for some time.
Does this mean that the danger, the threat of attacks like this in this country is greater now in the United States?
I wouldn't say it is greater, but I certainly think that the possibility of such attacks exists in the United States. It is something that we worry about all the time. It is something that we meet about all the time. It's something that frankly keeps me up at night, worrying about the lone wolf or a group of people, a very small group of people who decide to get arms on their own and do what we saw in France this week. It's the kind of thing that our government is focused on and doing all that we can in conjunction with our state and local counterparts to try to make sure it does not happen.
Well, there are reports that the Algerians warned the French authorities that something like this might happen. Do you have any information on that?
Well, this is something that will have to be part of an analysis of the whole incident, as we do in the United States when something happens like that in our country or when we disrupt a plot. We always look to see if there are ways in which we might have done something differently, and I'm sure that our French counterparts will be doing that as well, looking to see if there were things that they missed that might have prevented this from happening, and we will be sharing with them all the information that we have to help them in that analysis.
How many of these so-called homegrown terrorists do we think are in the United States right now, General Holder? And are we monitoring all of them? Are we confident we know who they are and where they are?
Well, I think that we are certainly doing, I think, a good job in monitoring those people. And when I say monitoring, I mean monitoring in an appropriate way using legitimate tools. We're not stereotyping anybody, but we are focused on those people who we have some reason to believe might engage in these kinds of activities. And I think that our FBI, in conjunction with our intelligence community and in conjunction with our state and local partners, I think we do a good job in keeping abreast of what these people are talking about and potentially what it is that they are planning.
General Holder, on another subject, the New York Times reported, and we have confirmed through our own sources at the Justice Department, that the FBI and federal prosecutors want to bring charges against former CIA Director David Petraeus for passing classified information to his then-girlfriend. We're told that you will make the final decision. Will you make that decision, or will you leave that to your predecessor?
Well, at this point, I don't want to comment on that, which is an ongoing investigation. The determination in any case is made at the time that all of the evidence has been acquired, all of the evidence has been reviewed, when it has been gone over with people who are the subjects of the investigation and with their lawyers. And so at the appropriate time, the proper people within the Justice Department will make determinations as to what, if any, action should occur.
Well, will that proper person be you, or will it be someone else?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, in terms of timing, I will be in office until my successor is confirmed. But I would expect that to the extent that there is a matter of this magnitude, that would be decided at the highest levels of the Justice Department.
All right. Well, General Holder, thank you for joining us this morning. And for more on this now, we're joined by Mike Morrell, the former Deputy Director of the CIA, now a CBS News Senior Security Contributor, and John Miller, who used to be at CBS News and is now the Deputy Commissioner for Intelligence and Counterterrorism for the New York Police Department. Gentlemen, thank you. Mike, to you first. Al-Qaeda in Yemen is now claiming responsibility for the first of these attacks. What do you make of that?
I can't remember a time, Bob, when Al-Qaeda in Yemen took responsibility for an attack and that turned out to be wrong. So I take the claim of responsibility, the claim that they directed this attack, very seriously. We don't know what direction means. It could simply be having told these two individuals who went to Yemen and trained to go back and attack this particular media outlet. It could have been more than that. We'll have to wait and see. But I do think Al-Qaeda was in part responsible for this. I do think that says something very, very important about all this. We've been focused on ISIS for the last 9 months to 12 months. This is a reminder that Al-Qaeda is still very dangerous and is still a very significant threat to the West, Western Europe, and the United States.
John Miller, the Attorney General touched on this, but what is it that is attracting people from these countries like France, some from the United States, other parts of Europe, to go to these Middle Eastern countries to get this training and then to come back with this sort of thing on their mind? What is this that's going on here?
You know, Bob, I think it's a couple of things. One, it's over the more than a decade since 9/11, the basic maturing of the ideology, but it's the delivery system that's made the real difference. They are putting out products on video, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, but particularly their videos. They're constructing messaging that rivals the ability of Madison Avenue in terms of packaging, in terms of being compelling, in terms of touching emotions. And frankly, in terms of constructing the story with a cleverly arranged set of facts that leaves out anything inconvenient. But the core message is, come fight here with us. The second part of the message, which is a threat to places like Paris and London and New York, is if you can't fight here in Syria, get what weapons you can get your hands on. Don't reinvent the wheel and fight there.
Well, what about the possibility that this attack in France makes it more likely that we may see some sort of an attack like this in the United States? What are you doing at the NYPD now?
Well, we're on a heightened security posture on a normal day compared to almost any other police department. With the amount of resources that we field in counterterrorism missions every day, that's more than 1,000 police officers and civilian analysts who are pointed at the counterterrorism mission every day. But when we see an event like France, we look at that threat stream, we look at what they did, we look at how they did it, we look at the target selection, and that becomes part of the overlay. So that's part of day-to-day business, but I don't think that we are under any more threat, and I have to underline, as Mike would tell you, or any less threat than we were the day before. There is a piece of this, as when you see a school shooting or a workplace violence thing, it doesn't start somebody who wasn't thinking about doing something like this down the road of doing it, but what it does is, and I think we saw a piece of this in Paris, it takes that person who's already thinking about it, already planning it, and may accelerate them.
One of the things that's sort of worrisome here, Mike, is that reports that the Algerians got some advance warning of this and passed it on to the French authorities.
Bob, there's going to be a full investigation here into the performance of the French police and French intelligence. I think one of the things that's really important to highlight are the resources that were available to French intelligence and the French police. Those resources were cut over the last several years. They had to make very difficult choices about who to focus on, who to surveil, and who they had to not surveil because they didn't have the resources. Governments are going to have to fund their law enforcement and their intelligence services to meet this threat, and that includes the United States.
John, I understand you got some disturbing new information last night on this front. Tell us about that.
Well, ISIL issued another threat yesterday. It's a video that was posted on Twitter, and it calls on its followers to attack targets in the West. It specifically mentions the United States, Canada, Great Britain, France, and it is a renewal of a call that they put out in mid-September before a series of attacks in Canada and one in New York City against police officers that occurred in October. So we're seeing that they are using the momentum from the Paris attacks in part of their messaging strategy to see who can we get to follow this. It also specifically mentions as targets civilians, police officers, intelligence officials, and military. So it is something of concern. We put out a citywide notice to police officers last night advising them of the message and reminding them to take extra care and be extra vigilant.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. This is disturbing news today, but we thank you for bringing it to our attention. Thank you. And we turn now to the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee here in the United States, Congressman Mike McCall of Texas. You just heard Mike Morrell saying, the intelligence services in France have had their budgets cut and then cut and cut some more. I understand that the Homeland Security budget is being cut, especially as far as the TSA, the people who are the people who guard our airports. Is that so? And are you satisfied? Are you good with that?
Well, we are planning to vote on Tuesday on a measure that would actually increase spending within the department.
But you're cutting TSA funds, right?
My understanding is there are plus-ups in many areas of the department, and I think TSA, obviously the overseas travel, is very important. Look, this is a threat that happened in Paris that could happen anywhere, and I think we need to be focused on that threat. This is a different style attack in the sense that you had foreign fighters that went to Yemen to train in the art of warfare and then bring that war back home to where they lived in France. That could happen here in the United States. We've had thousands of these Western travelers that have become foreign fighters in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen that pose a threat and a risk of returning to where they came from and to do the same thing that we saw in Paris. In addition, you hear a lot about the homegrown violent extremists, the lone wolf, if you will. We've heard a lot about that and radicalizing over the Internet, but it's this foreign fighter piece that disturbs me greatly because we don't have a good handle intelligence-wise who is on the ground in Syria, in Iraq, and Yemen to identify them, to put them on no-fly lists so they can't get in the country. These individuals were actually on a no-fly list and still traveled to Yemen and back. We had the woman, the female terrorist, leave and go to Syria, and yet she's on a no-fly list. So I think Europe has to strengthen and tighten its travel restrictions, but we need to look at protecting this country because I see it as a real threat.
Well, what do we need to do that we're not doing here?
Again, I think a couple things. I think our no-fly lists are working, I think, well, but you don't know what you don't know. We need to identify who has gone over there, traveled over there to fight this fight, and then how do we keep them off of airplanes and restrict their travel. Western Europe, again, is more lenient in their travel restrictions. And we have a visa waiver free system where they can fly into the United States without even having a visa. We need to look at all sorts of things like that. But mainly it's driven by intelligence. I'm launching an investigation on my committee to look at security and defense gaps that may exist as it pertains to foreign fighters. This is the most successful foreign fighter terrorist attack that we have seen to date.
Well, how much of a threat does al-Qaeda in Yemen pose now? Because we see now that they're taking credit for this attack. You heard Mike Morrell say when they say they take credit for it, it generally proves to be true.
And they did in a video last night. Remember, this is al-Awlaki who inspired Major Hassan at Fort Hood. These two brothers traveled to Yemen and trained under al-Awlaki in the art of warfare and took that back. So I would argue, you mentioned the war on terror to General Holder, and I think there's been in this administration a tendency to not call it that and to sort of have a false narrative that everything's okay, when in fact the threat, I believe, is not diminishing, it's getting greater in northern Africa, in the Middle East, and as the threat becomes greater, so too is the threat to the United States, and that's what we have to be prepared for.
So you think these are more dangerous times than before?
I believe with small-scale attacks, I think the larger-scale 9/11 style, more difficult to pull off, a bigger cell we can detect. A small cell like this one, very difficult to detect, deter, and disrupt, which is really our goal. And I think we're going to see more and more of these taking place, whether it be foreign fighters going to the warfare and return, or whether it be someone who's getting on the Internet, as John Miller talked about, and this very sophisticated social media program, and then radicalizing over the Internet.
Congressman McCall, thank you for joining us. And
Thanks,
we'll be
Bob.
back in 1 minute with more on all this.
Do you want to learn how to steal customer credit card information from major retailers so you can buy anything you want?